For over the last year now, I've been talking about what I think is a new source type of workplace violence, grievance-driven violence. And I covered it last week, and I've covered it literally 5 or 6 times over the last year. And I've covered it so much because I think we're missing something when it comes to workplace violence. If we want to prevent it effectively, that we really need to factor this in. Now, if you're a small California business whose employees interact with the public, who doesn't have a full-time security team nor a full-time compliance team, this is going to be really important for you to step up and fill in that void. And this is so important because the ramifications of even a single incident of workplace violence are tremendous. They can cause high turnover rates and absenteeism rates for employees. They can cause lower productivity. They can cause problems with your perception as an organization within the entire community, which can lead to lower sales and lower revenue. You can have higher insurance premiums, and you can get regulatory fines. But aside from that, the single most important thing is you need to keep your employees safe. And in truth, you need to keep yourself safe too, because grievance-driven violence is different. It often targets the owner or operator of a business, including professionals, and you may even have to worry about your license when you get somebody who gets on that type of grievance vendetta. In this piece today, we're going to look at not what grievance-driven violence is. As I said, I've covered that. But we want to look at what you need to make sure you're doing as an employer, and also what your employees are doing in order to make sure that you're complying with California's workplace violence prevention law, and you're doing everything that you can to keep your employees safer and protecting your organization from liability. I help small California organizations comply with California's regulatory requirements, as well as keep your employees safer and reduce your liability risk. I bring 30 years of investigating violence experience, including as a civil plaintiff investigator, bringing cases against employers where violence happened, as a criminal defense investigator where I represented people who were charged with violence, and conducting internal investigations at workplaces where workplace violence, assaults, harassment occurred. For over 10 years now, I've conducted workplace violence trainings and consultations with organizations ranging from law firms and medical practices and educational facilities to the Office of a United States Senator, helping to make sure that their employees were safe from workplace violence, that they knew what to do in case the situation got out of control, and to make sure that the employers were in regulatory compliance. If you're a small California organization whose employees interact with the public, and you're not sure where you stand in terms of compliance and safety for your employees, why not sign up for my free 15-minute workplace violence compliance and safety audit? Together, we'll go through where you are. I'll ask you a few very pointed questions about your workplace violence prevention program. We'll discuss where you're at, and then I'm going to give you a couple of things that you can do and implement right away. When it comes to grievance-driven violence, you have to think about this from an entirely different mentality. What's happening here is we are, as a society, more and more cleaved by grievance. It filters into the workplace in a couple of different ways. It may be political interactions in the workplace, but it can also be things, for example, we're dealing with a situation where economically things are much different. They're much more difficult, if we're going to be honest about things, than they used to be. The price of a new car is $50,000. My parents bought their first home for $17,000. That was an entire home. Now we're talking about 4 wheels and a motor and a place to go from point A to point B that costs $50,000. We're talking about an auto loan where the average term now is about 72 months, and most people are upside down on their loans for well over 4 years of that 72 months. Some people are even on 84-month loans. People's mortgage payments, their rent payments, are what car payments now look like. That causes a lot of strain, and with that, people look for someone to blame. So if you're in a car dealership and you sell cars, if you service cars, if you're a bank that does car loans, people are going to feel resentful, and that resentfulness can lead to grievance. If you're in the healthcare industry, the biggest rise that people have seen in their budgets are coming from healthcare. It's coming from rises in health insurance premiums. It's coming from the fact that we have to pay a lot more out of pocket for healthcare coverage than we used to, and the fact that these services are so much more expensive, these medications are so much more expensive. And again, that leads to resentment, and resentment leads to grievance. So if you're a small medical practice, if you run a small pharmacy, those things, if you're in the health insurance business, all of those can cause resentment, and that resentment can turn to grievance. So we need a practical approach for addressing what I'm calling the 5th source type of workplace violence. First and foremost, you need to do an assessment, not just of the overall safety hazards your employees face, but where grievance-driven violence could occur, where resentment could occur that can become targeted towards your organization. Now, keep in mind, your organization does not have to be the driver of this grievance. It can be your industry. It can be how someone perceives you in terms of that. So we have to kind of do an overall assessment that says, who might be resentful of what we're doing? Why are they resentful? And what does that mean for the safety of my employees? How they practice the work they do, how they go about the work they do, and not just the employees, because grievance-driven violence often targets the employers as well. You know, if you're a company that gets public comments on social media, make sure you read those. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a caveat here. Oftentimes, those complaints and even death threats that come over social media, someone calls on the phone, someone sends an email, those may not actually translate to violence. As a matter of fact, the majority of attacks are occurred by someone who never made a threat. Think about that, though. That's a pretty big deal. That makes it that much more difficult to prevent because they're operating off the radar. So we have to think about this as we're doing our assessments. Once you've gone through that process, you need to look at how your employees do their work, where they do their work, who they interact with while they do their work. And again, this can just be out in the public, does not have to be at your workplace itself, and think, where is the exposure to people with this type of grievance? You attend city council meetings. Who would be at a city council meeting? Maybe you run a construction company and you have a bid out. Maybe you're dealing with RFPs. Maybe you're dealing with the zoning change. All of those can lead you to going to a council meeting. So as an employer, or if your employees are going, that has to be factored in. Now, on a more basic level, if you're a small medical practice, if you're a doctor, if you're a dentist's office, if you're a medical spa, any of those types of things, people that are angry about treatment of some kind, and again, it doesn't have to be something you've done, may look at you as the appropriate target for their anger. So you have to factor that into the assessment. You have to factor that into where your employees and yourself interact with people that can be thinking this way. And you have to look at your practices and what practices can you adjust. You don't have to change them, but you can adjust them to reduce the access to these people or to reduce the safety risk from these people. Now, one of the challenges that small employers have that don't have full-time security, that don't have a full-time compliance team, is how do you implement this stuff day to day? So the first thing is, and this is by far the most important thing, situational awareness. Everyone in your organization must not only be trained in situational awareness, they have to implement it. It's no good to learn something that you put on the shelf. You've got to actually use it, and you have to use it day in and day out. Now, why is situational awareness so important? Because it's literally the only thing that your employees and yourself can do that can actually avoid an attack. Forget disarming an attacker. Forget trying to de-escalate a situation. It is literally the only safety practice you can engage in that gives you the chance to actually avoid something completely. So you need to make sure that your employees and yourself practice this, and not just at the workplace, because grievance-driven violence can affect you as an employer when you're out in the community and when you're actually at your own home, because you're at a fixed known point where someone can find you. In addition to that, your employees need to be able to read what's going on and detect people who are angry or a safety threat. Again, that's done through situational awareness. Violence can occur without warning. As I mentioned earlier, most of the people that make threats are blowing off steam. They're actually not going to do an attack. Most attacks occur from someone who doesn't make threats. So you're actually trying to remember in practice that an attack can occur without warning, without any amping up of rhetoric, without any threats. So you have to be prepared. Your employees are also going to need some strategies to avoid physical harm. So make sure you identify and work with people who can help your staff implement these strategies, because that will be their last clear chance to avoid physical harm. Now, a couple other things that you have to factor into on this. So we've talked about assessment. We've talked about recognition of what might cause someone with a grievance to launch an attack. You also have to think about where the attacks can occur. And those attacks are most likely to occur where you are most exposed. At a parking lot, in the driveway of your home, are where grievance-driven attacks are going to occur. Now keep in mind, and I've talked about this previously many times, what separates a grievance-based attack is the level of planning that goes into that attack. These people actually do dry runs. They will do surveillance and recon. So you have to think about, where are you most vulnerable? Where are your employees most vulnerable? And what practices can you implement and adjust? Can you change arrival times and departure times? Can you add in the buddy system so you've got people together looking for a potential attacker when they go to their cars? Very simple things, but things that can make all the difference if an attack occurs in their ability to be safe despite the attack. It can also make a huge difference in terms of how the state looks at what you've done, and also whether there's some liability. Maybe you have some clients at your business when a grievance-driven attack occurs, and those people may end up suing you. So by doing all of these things, you're taking down the heat. You're going to reduce your regulatory exposure. You're going to reduce your risk of a lawsuit. And most importantly, you're going to keep your employees safer and yourself safer. If you're a small California organization whose employees interact with the public and you're not sure where you stand in terms of compliance and safety on your workplace violence prevention plan, why not schedule a free 15-minute workplace violence compliance and safety audit. I'll ask you some very specific questions, point out some areas where I think you can make improvements, or if you're doing well, I'll say, hey, you've got this down. And I'll give you a couple of tips that you can implement right away. All you have to do is click on the link and schedule your free consultation.